Hello, Kevin H. Shaw here, just giving you a heads up that this episode of Real Obscure features brief discussions of content that may be unsuitable for younger listeners. Hello and welcome to Real Obscure. My name is Kevin H. Shaw, and in this episode we're taking a look at a movie featuring a sinister samurai, telekinetic terror, and a cornucopia of camouflage. From 1983, it's the... honestly I don't even know how to describe it movie, Bloodbeat. Bloodbeat was directed by Fabrice Ange Zafiratos, and is, to date, his lone directorial credit, although he did write the movie Le Grand Ferme in his native France. France? He also wrote, edited, shot and scored the movie, and it was also filmed in his home. Given how low the budget was, he probably did all of the catering too. The film was a co-production between the US and France and was shot in Wisconsin. Director of photography Vladimir Maul misunderstood the assignment and thought he was making a TV movie. As a result, he filmed in full screen instead of widescreen, which was something Zafiratos only discovered 2 weeks into production. Being a micro-budget movie, the cast of Bloodbeat was made up of locals recruited to appear in the movie, and none of whom were professional actors. IMDb does list some additional credits for Terry Brown, who plays Gary, but IMDb is based on user submissions and I can't find any credits elsewhere. I suspect this may be therefore incorrect. It's also worth noting that every cast member listed for this movie has an image from the film as their headshot. Anyway, on to the rest of the cast and characters. Helen Benton plays Kathy, an amateur painter and Gary's long-term girlfriend. Her children, Ted and Dolly, are played by James Fitzgibbons and Dana Day respectively. Claudia Payton plays Sarah, Ted's girlfriend. Peter Spelson plays Uncle Pete, and Frank Miley and Carol Wagner play their neighbours Paul and Christy. Kathy and Gary, Benton and Brown, are an unmarried long-term couple, living on a remote plot in Wisconsin. In reality, the two were indeed in a relationship, and many of their interactions were apparently based on their real-world partnership. Which, given how much they argue in the movie, might not be a good thing. So it's Christmas, and Kathy is expecting a visit from her 2 children, Ted and Dolly. Gary announces he'd love to surprise the pair by telling them he's going to be their stepdad and marry Kathy. She, however, does not find this idea appealing, despite the fact that Gary actually seems like quite a nice guy, and he has a good loving relationship with Kathy's children. So the 2 adult children arrive, with Ted bringing his new girlfriend Sarah with him. As Sarah is introduced to Kathy, we see the first hint of the latter's psychic powers. She immediately shows maybe distress when she meets Sarah, indicated by some very odd expressions and some great 1980s swooshing electronic sound effects. They all go into the house and Dolly goes into full-on Randy from Christmas Story mode, looking at the gifts under the tree and getting overly excited at the prospect of Christmas. I should mention she's a young adult, old enough to attend college, which she has just quit. This is about as close as we get to any kind of real plot point in the movie, and it's actually dropped pretty quickly. So Dolly, finds a gift under the tree for Sarah. But nobody knew Sarah was coming, except Kathy, who placed the gift there for her. And that's not because Ted told her she was coming or anything like that. This is again her psychic powers manifesting. Sarah is shown the guest room and we're given a history of a former occupant who was into psychic research or new age something. A lot of the movie's dialogue is muted at times, partially due to the somewhat mumblecore way the cast perform it, and also because the sound quality isn't great. There's also a weird random pipe in the middle of the room, which you probably wouldn't even notice except Sarah decides she's going to have some business going on when she's acting and starts messing with it. Uncle Peter arrives and the group all decide they're going to go out hunting, much to Sarah's horror. The 5 of them stalk around in the woods until they see a deer. As Gary and Ted both go to take their shot, Sarah shouts and ruins their aim as the deer flees unharmed. Sarah, overcome with panic, runs away, and as she runs headlong through the woods, she encounters a man whose stomach has been slit open. As he dies, he grabs onto Sarah, much to her horror. The police and paramedics arrive and dismiss it as some kind of hunting accident, and, well, it's never mentioned again. Now, you may have noticed that there are some odd moments like this in the movie. It is quite surreal, but not in that David Lynch kind of way. Rather, it's just like weird. It's like a Martian made it or something. Zephyritos himself admitted he wasn't much of a director and liked to improvise a lot. This is certainly clear from a lot of the scenes, where you get the impression he just put a couple of actors in a room and told them just to improvise an argument. So there are lots of pauses, lots of lines being repeated, and random jumps of logic from one topic to the next. It also probably didn't help that Zephyritos also admitted he was taking a lot of mind-expanding drugs during the movie's production. Anyway, back to the plot. Sarah is upset by the day's events and so goes to bed. But she awakens during the night and discovers a chest, in which is a set of Japanese armour and a couple of swords. As she examines it, Kathy, who is painting, has some kind of seizure and begins automatically painting. It's a shadowy figure emerging from a crimson void, and as she does this, she has a flashback to painting as a child. Sometime later, Gary comes to talk with Kathy, and after initially trying to listen to her problems and help her, the two argue, with Gary saying he's not a piece of plastic you can just push around. I'm sure the actor probably thought that was a better line before he said it. And then we cut to the family sitting in the living room. Kathy is reading a book, Ted and Dolly are playing Monopoly, and Gary dons the most 1980s headphones as he sits watching the world's tiniest TV by himself. Sarah, meanwhile, sits beside Kathy, making faces as if something is causing her concern, and as she tries to shake off this uneasy feeling, we cut to Uncle Peter, who has wrecked his truck and is stuck in a roadside ditch. The camera tracks towards him, and, as he turns, his throat is slashed by an unseen menace. Somewhat distressed, Sarah goes to bed, and we then see scenes of their neighbours, Paul and Christy, preparing to go to sleep. Paul sends Christy to the kitchen to make him tea and then bring him his juice, which is powdered orange drink and faucet water, served in a Porky Pig tumbler. Classy and delicious. As this is happening, we see Sarah in bed. She's in a trance-like state where she begins moaning in ecstasy and curling her hips as we see Christy being run through with a katana. Paul, meanwhile, realises there is something wrong when Christy doesn't immediately return with his orange drink-style liquid. Again, it's clear Paul is improvising the scene here as he repeats the words, "Chris, what are you doing? Chris," multiple times. At this point, it appears Sarah is indulging in a bit of, shall we say, downstairs DJing, as Paul is chased through the house by an unseen entity, running from room to room before throwing himself through a window. Paul flees to Kathy and Gary's house, but before he can find help, he is slain with a samurai sword. Ted and Gary find the bloodied remains of their friend pinned to their front door, at which point all hell breaks loose in the house. Items fly off the shelves, the fire in the grate flares, and doors slam shut, imprisoning the family in different rooms. Kathy goes into a trance, seeing visions of a samurai stalking through their yard as Gary is knocked unconscious by a flying can of tab. It's a wonderfully unhinged sequence, with Zafiretos actually doing a surprisingly effective job with his limited budget and effects. Of course it's just people off camera shaking things or hurling items into frame, but there's a manic energy about it. It's the kind of thing you'd expect almost in a Sam Raimi movie, just a little sloppier and cheaper. As the samurai stalks outside, Kathy stands in the living room shaking and chanting, "What do you want from me?" over and over. And as Ted and Dolly are menaced by the samurai's katana, her hands begin to glow with red energy as she banishes the spectre. Now if this sounds insane, trust me, you don't even know the half of it. Without giving more spoilers, the movie continues in this vein, with people developing psychic powers, the samurai stalking around, and a finale that involves World War II pilots, an exposition that's completely drowned out by the soundtrack, and many more scenes of plot development that do more to confuse than enlighten. Now I know I seem as if I'm criticising the production, but what I'm trying to do is point out how these bizarre, inexplicable decisions actually make this a really fun movie. Seriously, with no sense of irony, I'm genuinely left admiring the fact that Zafiretos and co were able to put together such an ambitious project. Did they land it? Well, almost. Improvising the dialogue makes for a very odd narrative experience. As I mentioned, the actors frequently repeat the same lines over and over, almost as if trying to give a best take, but the editor didn't get the memo. Although given Zafiretos was the editor, maybe he was just trying to fill the runtime, or maybe his mind-altering drugs were being particularly mind-altering that day. And yes, the effects aren't great, even for the period. It's not even that they're terrible, it's just more the way they're employed, with random colour switches and glowing effects that look like something from an episode of Scooby-Doo. But here's the thing, it may be a baffling, rambling and incoherent mess, but it's also a damned entertaining, baffling, rambling and incoherent mess. Zafiretos himself admitted he wasn't a horror fan, and really didn't know much about the genre when he made this. Friday the 13th was his only frame of reference, and you can see he's attempting to recreate this movie by deconstructing that seminal slasher and picking the meat off its bones. There are plenty of stabbings and slashings. We get a lot of first-person stalking views, and there's even nudity. The director wanted a love scene to compete with other slasher movies of the time, but none of the locals were professional actors and balked at the idea of appearing nude on camera. Eventually, Claudia Payton, who plays Sarah, agreed to shoot the scene, so long as it was tastefully shot. It was actually the first scene they filmed, as Zafiretos was worried she would back out. Apparently she became so comfortable being nude on set that when filming a later scene, her shirt became unbuttoned and she didn't even bother trying to cover it up. I always say that the worst sin a movie can commit is to be boring, and Bloodbeat is never boring. It's complete nonsense in the best possible way, with moments of unexplained plot points, surreal, stilted performances, and just a wonderfully bonkers energy that grabs you by the neck and doesn't let go until the end credits roll. Is it scary? No. Is it well made? No. Does it have anything to say? Absolutely not. But if you're in the market for a weird, bizarre stalk and slash movie that will stick with you long after the movie's end, then you'll love Bloodbeat. I know I do. And on that note, thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of Real Obscure. This episode of Real Obscure was written, produced, directed, edited, and fluffed by me, Kevin H. Shaw. Our theme tune, Fuhr Manfred und Siggi, was written using Udio, as was our background theme, the Monster Dub. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, subscribe, follow, comment, or leave a review. You can find all our previous episodes, along with news, updates and more, over at realobscurepod.com, or you can drop us an email at hellorealobscure@gmail.com. Content from Bloodbeat is used for educational purposes under Section 107 of the Copyright Act, Fair Use, and remains the property of the respective copyright holder. Presented here for the purposes of critique, commentary and discussion. No copyright infringement is intended. So please, don't sue us.